So let me use like a little thought experiment to explain why I believe in idealism over materialism. So imagine you had a rationalist, right? He's a bit of an idealist and he's holding a coin. And he says, if I flip this coin, it's 50-50 if I get heads. But along comes Mr. Empiricist and he says, what rubbish. And he's got, devil horns and whatnot.
Mhm.
And he says, you don't know that getting a coin, flipping a coin will get 50-50. You have no way of knowing that. That's just an abstract ideal you came up with in your head. I'll tell you what, though. I'll do an experiment and look at what the physical material circumstances say, because we'll let the empirical evidence decide. And so he flips a coin, let's say 100 times, and he gets 60 heads and 40 tails. That's not 50-50. All right, well, let's say he tries the experiment again. He gets 51 heads, 59 tails. Well, that's still not 50-50. It's close, but it's not 50-50. And then next he gets, all sorts of different outcomes.
Materialism isn't about ignoring the abstract mathematical concepts or constructions. Materialism is just about it's an analytical framework where you understand that class conflict and the dialectical process of resolving those conflicts is the primary driving force behind human social development. But that doesn't. I don't think that necessarily entails like a rejection of like mathematical proofs. You kind of have to have those to function.
Right, and I don't think rationalism means rejecting materialism either, but here's the question, right? You have the 50-50 probability, which is rational. It's a rational concept, and then you have the coin, or the actual material, the expression of that probability, right? Which is more true? Which is closer to what is true? Is it the experimental empirical evidence, which never comes up 50-50 or maybe very rarely does? Or is it the rational 50-50 concept, which is more true?
But they're not in conflict. This is just the nature of probabilistic calculations. You can arrive
at the nature of that because rational probability is more true than the actual empirical expression of it. That's why rational truths are more superior to empirical ones.
It's not that it's more true. It is true that the coin landed on heads 60 times and tails 40 times. That's an empirical fact. They're both empirical facts. You have the abstract probability, and then you have the manifestation of that probability in a given set of outcomes. And then you have two things, the hypothetical proportion of heads versus tails, and the actual set of outcomes. But they don't conflict with each other. Only an irrational person would look at one and deny the existence of the other. They both exist without conflict.
Right, but like that, you're only saying that from the perspective of a rational framework. So the only way that you can say that the empirical evidence, which displays, like if we take that example, none of those times did it show up 50-50. However, you can explain using another rational concept like the bell curve thing. However, like the probability of like the area under the bell curve, that explains why it's not always going to show up 50-50. But that's another rational framework to explain the why the material reality doesn't necessarily one-to-one correlate with the rational framework.
But this doesn't conflict with material analysis. There's a difference between a mathematical probabilistic estimation or calculation and like the idea of there being an ideal form of a pizza. They're entirely different things. One of them can be arrived at through calculation. The other one is a moral prescription. Or to put it another way, like if you wiped out all of humanity and tried to like reconstruct all of this in absentia, like without us present, like aliens or whatever, or other evolved animals that come after us, they could arrive at the hypothetical 50-50 calculation, but absent cultural context, they would never know what the ideal pizza is. It's a value that exists entirely within our own like preset moral and social expectations.
Right. Well, and they would have like different tastes that have arrived out of different evolutionary pressures and things like that. So, yeah, like what an ideal, I guess, any kind of food to them would be different based on what their needs are and things like that. If they're like a different aliens or different humans that live in a different society,
even amidst humans today, nobody knows what the ideal pizza is. We literally have like intercity conflicts in America over what style of pizza is best. Like clearly, there's not an ideal pizza. We just have a general like preference for things that taste good, and nobody can really agree exactly on what that is.
Well, I'm not one of those what's the word, non-pluralists, I guess. Well, I'm only a little pluralist in my idealism. Like I think there can be multiple different ideas of what it means to be the ideal of something, like depending on what it is that you know, but just because there's multiple ideas doesn't mean it doesn't exist within like certain boundaries, right? Like an ideal pizza would have to have in some way bread, cheese, you know, the sauce, but it couldn't have like, it couldn't just be like a cake or something, like, or
Sure
it
it
couldn't
could.
just be literally something that grows out of the ground or something,
There are
because
pizzas
that's
without
not
cheese and without sauce, though. I've never seen a pizza without bread, but I'm sure given enough time, somebody will invent one, and people will be like, "Yeah, it's a pizza," and like, you know, they'll roll with it.
right. And it's, I guess that's kind
Cauliflower
of
pizza,
fits.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that kind of sort of that sort of goes into that whole what is a chair thing, doesn't it?
Well,
But
yeah,
like,
I don't believe in the ideal form of anything, so I can't. So I like the circles we're running in right now. I would maintain for literally any concept. Um, you know, even mathematical ones. You know, there's still like scientific epistemology that people can learn about, and like even mathematical proofs are dependent upon certain presuppositions that we have to make. Though those are a lot more abstract, of course, because mathematical calculations are more divorced from immediate material considerations and sensory input.
right. So like, if we're doing like the epistemology sort of chicken and egg thing, which is more important, empirical information or rational information, you got to sort of figure out, well, what's all truth based on, right? Is all truth based on empirical reality? Like, is rationality just a way of explaining empirical reality, which is the real truth, or is empirical reality the shadow on the wall that Plato described in his allegory of the cave, and the, you know, the rationality is the true thing? And I would say that because all claims of truth are built on the rational assumption that truth itself is truth, which is, you know, like, because there are smartasses out there that reject that idea for whatever reason,
Yeah,
just because they're being edgy.
there's at least one of them in this call right now, actually.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Oh, wait, do you believe that truth is not actually truth?
I'm a postmodernist. I have to.
Well, I thought postmodernism was just like, you didn't believe that there was one idea of truth, but they could all. I didn't realize it was actually a rejection of the concept of truth.
Well, there's a belief in a utilitarian value of some types of truth over others, but if you don't necessarily believe in a fundamental truth, a one singular truth, you have to understand that as long as there are different like perspectives on truth, there must necessarily be some kind of external criteria by which we're valuing some types of truth over others, right? And that would be a form of subjectivity. Obviously, I would still disagree with people who have different ideas on truth, because having a subjective take on something or an intersubjective take doesn't mean that you can't have disagreements with other people with intersubjective takes.
Right, but the issue is like, if I say the words "truth is truth," that's saying A equals A. This is the most fundamental, basic level of logic we can go with. Like, if we reject this, there's no way to be able to describe anything. All logic and all rationality has to go out the window if we can't say A equals A, truth equals truth.
I agree with
So
tautology.
Right. So if truth then equals truth, and that is something like we don't have to believe it, because like you said, you're a postmodernist, you can technically reject it. Technically, in a sense, saying truth equals truth, because there's no, like, you're at the bedrock of epistemology. There's no other faith. There's no
Well,
other
the
truth that you can use to support that.
the core with tautology is that it doesn't really tell you anything, right? Like, if you think truth equals
Yeah.
truth, that's fine, but that doesn't necessarily mean that truth exists in an objective sense. Um, that would just mean that it is what it is. But I believe that all things are what they are, in some senses. I mean, that's more philosophy than anything, right? You know? Is
Right.
your brother, or if they abandoned you at a critical moment in the battlefield, are they no longer your brother? Well, what do you mean by brother? Do you mean like a comrade, or do you mean like biological your brother, you know? Is someone your brother if you fought with them for 20 years, but they're not literally related to you? Well, like, so even in tautology, is a brother a brother? Well, you know,
Well, I agree with that, because
one could
like I
argue.
actually Well, yeah, I actually only have half brothers, and I have like a stepdad and everything like that. But because my stepdad was the one who essentially raised me, as much of, you know, I don't always agree with him on a lot of things, and he can be a bit of a dick. I still consider him my father. I don't call him stepdad. I call him my father, because, you know, he was the one who raised me. And at the end of the reason, I base this on the idea that, like, if they have the essence of what it means to be a father, then they're my dad. You know, like, if they're the one that raised me, they were you know, they had the essence of what it means to be a fatherly figure, then that's what they were. You
But
know.
this is not the only truth. And what a fatherly figure is hardly a settled objective issue, no?
Well, I guess that's, why I got to debate bro more so that the rest of the world can realize I'm right, they're wrong, and they can suck my dick.
Well, sure, of course, obviously. That's the point of believing in multiple truths, right? To argue that your interpretations are better. But the only point that I'm arriving at here, these are all linguistic traps, at any rate. You can't communicate
Fair
ideas.
enough.
You can only ever communicate ideas through language, indirectly. And the language that we use is inarticulate and incapable of truly translating the things that we're thinking at any given point. We don't really discuss concepts. We discuss commonly agreed upon terms to refer to concepts. And behind all those layers of abstraction, the idea of arguing over fundamentals, certainly metaphysics, seems to me like mostly a waste of time. I don't believe in metaphysical conversations because I don't think we can really meaningfully weigh in on them. And I certainly don't believe in dictating anything in reality based on metaphysical presuppositions, hence my problem with religion. But
And then again, if you consider truth equals truth to be a metaphysical proposition, then I'm afraid we're going to have to let that bear on reality. That's just the way it's going to be.
you have to make some presuppositions in order to arrive at basic understandings of the world. Like, for example, you have to trust the idea of sensory input. You have to believe that you are participating in reality, because if you can't do that, you can't really do anything. But I don't think that just because some metaphysical presuppositions have to be made, that necessarily means that all metaphysical presuppositions are justified or necessary or useful. I think that only the ones that have to be made in order to participate should be justified. Perception, input, sensory, what have you. The other stuff, I think, should be left aside. It serves no utility to pretend in its existence.